Hey everyone, I'm Jean Chatsky. Thanks so much for joining us today on HerMoney. Even though, as you know, the HerMoney podcast is all about money, it is also about everything else in life that money touches, which is basically, well, everything. And of course, money isn't unique in that way. Our health also impacts our daily life and the decisions that we make, like pretty much nothing else. So, whenever we have the chance to talk about the intersection of money and health, well, let me just say those shows are some of my favorites. Today, we're going to dive into a topic in the world of women's health that has long been ignored in American society. We are going to talk about menopause, which is, let me just say, a big deal. By 2030, 1 billion women worldwide will have entered or be about to enter menopause. Over 80% of all women experience neurological symptoms during menopause. 75% of women who seek care for menopausal treatment end up going home with nothing. Fewer than 1 in 5 OBGYN residents receive formal training in menopause medicine, and on average, medical costs for menopausal women aged 45 to 54 are 47% higher than they are for women of the same age who are not exhibiting menopausal symptoms. That's according to the consulting firm Milliman. Thankfully, the world and the medical community is waking up to the realization that we got to look into this, and women need help. One of the incredible doctors leading the way is Dr. Lisa Mosconi. She is an associate professor of neuroscience in neurology and radiology and director of the Alzheimer's prevention program at Weill Cornell. She is a world-renowned neuroscientist who was named one of the 17 most influential living female scientists by the New York Times and dubbed the Mona Lisa of neuroscience by Elle. And her new book, The Menopause Brain, is now flying off the shelves. Lisa, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
I think many of our listeners may feel like they know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it just to level set. What is menopause really?
Oh, it's a really good question. And actually, there's an official answer and then there's my answer. Can I give you both?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
The official answer is that menopause is the end of a woman's reproductive life. And it's really defined based on the function of the ovaries. There is an understanding that at some point the ovaries will start producing follicles and the menstrual cycle will stop, also leading to a woman's reproductive senescence or a lack of ability to bear children moving forward. Now, that is the traditional understanding of what menopause is. The actual scientific and more complex understanding and definition, which is also more correct, is that menopause is a neuroendocrine transition state, which means that this transition or this change impacts your brain just as much as it impacts your ovaries, with the difference, important difference, that the ovaries may close down shop, but your brain cannot afford to do that. And therefore, menopause is effectively a renovation project on the brain, where a woman's brain learns to depend less on hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and needs to find other pathways and other routes to provide energy for itself and protect itself and rewires itself to really support women's brain health for another 30 years or longer.
When you talk about things like hot flashes and memory lapses and anxiety and depression, those are all neurological symptoms that come from the way that menopause changes the brain, correct?
That's exactly right. And I find it very interesting that most women are aware that menopause may bring about some changes like hot flashes, right? But even then, for many women have come to me saying there's something wrong with my skin. And I'm like, no, it's actually your brain. There's a very specific part of the brain that's called the hypothalamus, which is in charge of regulating body temperature, that is impacted by the fluctuations in hormone levels. And that is supposed to be triggering the hot flashes, at least in part, is one of the reasons that women get hot flashes. So it's the brain that's glitching and regulating body temperature from the neck down. And at the same time, the symptoms you mentioned, the insomnia, the anxiety, the brain fog, the memory lapses, those are all symptoms of menopause. They have nothing to do with the ovaries and everything to do with the brain. It's the brain that is changing, and these changes produce or trigger the symptoms that so many women actually suffer from. Because, as debilitating or as unpleasant as hot flashes can be, the number one concern for menopausal women is brain fog.
I believe it. I have been there and I have done that. And I was laughing in my head when you said the brain is glitching when you have a hot flash, because my brain was literally glitching 20 times a day. And not just from the neck down, by the way. Like I got sweaty from the neck up too. But we're gonna come back to that. When you started your research, there wasn't a single study that looked at women's brains before and after menopause. So when you looked at women's brains before and after menopause, what did you find?
The first study that we did was back in 2017, which is actually offensive. As a woman, I was profoundly offended. I was not doing research on menopause. I was doing research on Alzheimer's prevention. And we ended up studying menopause because we and others have found that it may be a trigger for Alzheimer's disease for some women. And therefore, as a scientist, I said, well, what's been done already? What do we know about the impact of menopause on the brain as women go through it? And what I've learned is that very, very little research had been done to really look at women's brains as a function of menopause. And all the research at that point looked at menopause more like an outcome, what happens after. So the brain imaging was done on women who were perhaps a decade past their last menstrual period. Our question was more, how does menopause impact the brain as women go through it, as a process, as an actual transition? And so we started doing brain scans. At first, we were comparing women who were either premenopausal or perimenopausal in the middle of the transition, or postmenopausal. But now it's been 7 years and counting, and we have data on the same women as this woman's brain is going through having or not having a menstrual cycle, which is quite fascinating from a neuroscience and neurological perspective. And what we have learned is that the brain changes as women progress through menopause, and there are changes in gray matter volume, which gets a little bit thinner in some parts of the brain. There are changes in brain energy levels, and mostly there's a little bit of a decline, a reduction in brain energy, which so many women can tell, right? It doesn't take a
Absolutely.
brain scan. Yes. But evidently it does take a brain scan, because so many scientists and providers do not believe, and so many people just do not believe that menopause actually impacts the brain directly. And we also found changes in connectivity and changes in biochemistry. So in other words, menopause is a neurologically active process that is related to the aging process, but is also independent of chronological aging in many ways, that reshapes and rewires women's brains in ways that we're really just starting to get real data about. I believe we're still one of the very few centers looking at women as women are going through menopause. So I'm hoping that more and more scientists will start also looking into it, because it's so important.
The reshaping and rewiring, what does it do to us? How does it manifest itself? I'm thinking of all of the incredibly vital, productive women that I know, over 50, over 60, over 70. Are all of these changes negative, or some of them positive? What is happening up here? I'm hitting my own head.
So what we know is that menopause changes women's brains in ways that are not that different from puberty and pregnancy, right? So we think of these important times in a woman's life as being disjointed from each other. But in reality, it's the same network, it's the neuroendocrine network that is activated during puberty, is overactivated during pregnancy every time a woman is pregnant, and then is partially deactivated after menopause. So these symptoms that women experience during menopause are actually not alien. If you think about it, we've all had a preview, right? If puberty was a little difficult, the mood swings during puberty are off the charts sometimes, or the
Yes.
sleepiness, the brain fog, or the change in body temperature. You sweat as a teenager, right? And the same things can happen during pregnancy. 30% of pregnant women have hot flashes. We just don't call them hot flashes, right? This is just something that happens to you because you have a baby in your belly and your body needs to elevate body temperature to host the pregnancy. And there's the baby blues, and there's postpartum depression, and the sleepless nights or too much sleepiness. Something similar happens during menopause because it's the same brain that is at this point saying, I don't need all these neurons that were regulating the menstrual cycle and were enabling a pregnancy, should you choose to get pregnant. So all these neurons can go. So in a way, it's a chance. Menopause is a biological clue for the brain to get leaner and meaner, right? This is something that we're exploring right now, and I think it makes so much sense neurologically because it's really expensive to have a big brain with all these different neurons. So if you don't need them, you're better off just getting rid of them, which, however, leads to the rewiring and the changes in energy levels and the changes in gray matter volume and the symptoms of menopause that may come from this rewiring and remodeling. Now, is it all bad? No. There are contrasting theories. I'm optimistic personally, and I do see an evolutionary explanation for menopause, which is called the grandmother hypothesis. And at the bare minimum, what this hypothesis says that at some point in the course of evolution, something happened to women's brains and bodies that enabled women to outlive menopause and enter another non-reproductive stage of life, which is very unique. It's very unique in biology because actually the vast majority of female animals die soon after the end of their reproductive span. Basically, their lifespan tends to coincide with the reproductive span. Not so for women, which is actually, I believe, a huge gift in so many ways. And only 4 other animals outlive menopause, and these are killer whales, which I think is wonderful. I
Great.
love that. Another type of whale is the Norway. And then one type of elephant, the Asian elephant, perhaps a type of giraffe, and then a little insect. It's called the Japanese aphid, which somehow turns into a spike ball, like a hedgehog almost after menopause. Like, do not come near me. And I think it's really sweet. But so I would say that number one, the ability to outlive menopause is a gift, effectively a gift. Aging, in my opinion, is a gift. Now, we don't want to be negatively impacted, right? So for the symptoms, there are solutions, there are things that one can do to feel better. There's no need to suffer through menopause. But also, neurologically, we know that menopause is associated with greater life contentment for many women. And if I may elaborate more on this, because I know that most people are like, what did she say? But actually, there are surveys and psychological studies they looked at life contentment as a function of age and menopause. And what the studies have shown that there's this lump in happiness as
The
women go through
smile.
menopause. Yes, the smile. Yeah, that's yeah. I was thinking a U shape, but the smile is so much better. But then life contentment actually rebounds on average 4 or 5 years after the final menstrual period, and then keeps increasing, which was interpreted as postmenopausal women being generally more content than premenopausal women, but also being generally more content than they themselves were before going through menopause. And this, of course, it depends. There's variability. It's not an absolute, but I think it's encouraging that on average, women can experience renewed energy and better mental health and more happiness in some ways after going through menopause. And also greater empathy
Mm.
and emotional mastery, which means that things that used to upset you in the past do not hold the same charge after menopause. I just think that it's encouraging to think of menopause as in a different way than this doom and gloom narrative that's been really permeating the conversation for so many years, where we see menopause as something to fight or fix or we're trying to get away from. Why not embracing it and just looking at some of the positives at least, while also making sure that nobody suffers as a result of it? There's no need to suffer. And still today, menopause is one of these very few, if not the only scenario in medicine where silent suffering is not only accepted, but actually encouraged.
100% on that. And it particularly has to change at work. As you know, we are a money show. So let's talk about the cost of menopause. A Mayo Clinic study found that it costs American women an estimated $1.8 billion in lost working time each year. When you think about the cost of menopause, how do you frame it? And how do you, for women who are looking to control their own individual economies, how do you suggest they deal with it?
It's a really good question, and I'm not an economist by by any means, but I think what's happening in menopause is that women are looking for relief, and relief comes in ways that are not as straightforward as one would wish. It's very unusual for a woman to go to a provider or a menopause specialist and come out of the office with a prescription for hormone therapy. You're much more likely to be bounced around and having to see many different specialists, just trying to, number one, understanding what's happening to you, because a lot of
Right.
providers do not necessarily associate things like brain fog or insomnia or anxiety or depression with menopause. The answer usually is just grin and bear it.
How do you get past that? I mean, I can tell you, I've been on hormone therapy now for, I don't know, 6, 7 years,
Mhm.
maybe. I went on it when I was in perimenopause, went on the patch with the estrogen patch, which is just a patch you change twice a week, and a 3 month, every 3 month regimen of progesterone. And my secret sauce was that my doctor is 2 years older than me. And so everything that I was going through, she had gone through 2 years before. And it was just, I could not have imagined having a better doctor to shepherd me through this. But for women who feel like I need help, how do you get that help from a doctor? How do you find the right
Mhm.
doctor?
Yes, and also I want to clarify, I'm not pushing HRT on anyone. I'm just saying that for many women in the United States of America, women who go to their providers for the symptoms of menopause, only 4% are prescribed hormones at this stage. And it's unlikely that only 4% of women would actually benefit from hormone therapy. But also, it's important to have a well rounded conversation about all possible options. Some women don't want to take hormones. Some women don't do well on hormones. Some women cannot take hormones. So it's really important to have a frank and complete thorough conversation around every possible option. And then you decide for yourself with your provider, hopefully, based on your own risk and benefit profile and also your own risk tolerance, which is another very important factor to consider. Now, how do you find a doctor to have this conversation with? I was surprised to hear that it's not as easy because, like you said before, only 1 in 5 residents, OB/GYN residents, actually trains in menopause care. So that's a little bit of a barrier to start with. So one helpful tip is to go to the website of the North American Menopause Society and look for the list of accredited providers. So they provide a list of all the practitioners, of all the OB/GYNs who are trained in menopause care. And then call the office and confirm, right, that the doctor is trained in menopause and it's up to speed and all the insurance is good to go. If you can't find a provider on that list who lives in your area, or perhaps you like your OB/GYN or you like your own doctors, then just ask them, are you well versed in menopause care? And some people will say yes, and some people will say no, but it's good to know upfront if you need to change providers at this point in your life. Something that I will love personally is to see integrative care when it comes to menopause, because the best OB/GYN, the best one, will still not be trained to assess or manage your brain health, right? That's not what OB/GYNs do.
Right.
So I would love to see other specialists also being involved, because I think it's past time that we really started looking at the woman as an organism and not a bunch of bits and pieces and different organs that magically come together and become a person. The changes in hormonal concentration do impact your ovaries, but they also impact your brain, your heart, your lungs, your digestion, your metabolic support, your metabolic processes. And I think integrative health will be very, very important moving forward.
Another complicated, difficult landscape to navigate is the landscape at work.
Yeah.
What do you suggest to women who are experiencing all of these changes and symptoms and rewiring? What's the best way to get through it and maintain your career?
Well, I would say appropriate medical care is really the first step, because as soon as you find the right solution or patterns or combinations of solutions to support your symptoms and ease you through them, then you'll feel better at work as well as any other time of your life. And then I think the change needs to come from employers rather than employees, right? It's the companies, the CEOs who need to implement changes where perhaps a more flexible schedule could help, the ability to work from home on some days. Yes, having coolers around the office or having fans or just cooling the temperature in some rooms if need be, but also mostly inclusiveness and culture, just changing the culture around menopause, where it is understood that the same way that you express sympathy to a woman who is pregnant and there's an understanding that she may have a hard day, or if she's crying, she may need a hug, right? Or maybe a little time to herself. I think the same courtesy should be extended to women who are going through menopause. And also, I would also say, forget about being embarrassed. I hear it so many times that women just feel ashamed. They feel insecure. They feel like, oh, I'm sweating, so I can't give a talk. How about we just say it out loud? I'm having hot flashes and I'm here anyway. And if it bothers you, maybe you just grow up. This is my approach. And I want a party. When I go through menopause, I'm going to have a party.
Oh, I think that's a phenomenal idea. But I went on hormone therapy because I had a hot flash on television, right? And I felt like
That's different.
I never want to do that again, right? I never want to do that again. I want to be able to be in some control. It
Yes,
didn't
of course.
completely get rid of them, but it got rid of most of them. You write about something that you call a second adulthood in menopause, which some women have referred to as a meno start,
Yes.
where women embark on new beginnings, new careers, new interests. What does this look like?
According to women who talk about this, it sounds like the menopausal zest, which actually anthropologist Margaret Mead came up with. So yes, I give her full credit for inspiring me to look at menopause as another chance to really appreciate your own life and perhaps engage even more in self-care than most women are able to do prior to menopause, because menopause is a little bit of a strange time in a woman's life where your children are now growing, your parents are getting older, you're a bit sandwiched in between family responsibilities, probably your career at work and everything else that's happening and going on in your life, and then just menopause on top of it. And what many women report is a feeling of relief in a way once midlife and menopause actually are through. And for many women, it's a time of transformation where you're able to reflect more about you and what you want in life and everything you've accomplished. And there's often a feeling of renewed gratitude towards your own body and yourself for being able to really to handle so much in your life. And it's a wonderful way to really think about the rest of your life, because most women spend between 30 and 40% of their entire lifespan in a postmenopausal stage. So I think it's really important to optimize for your self-care and your health and your mental well-being. So that part of your life may not be reproductive, but can certainly be very productive and a very, very good way to be alive and being on this planet. I personally adore women. I have the greatest respect for women's minds and women's bodies, and I think there's so much to look forward to. And I so appreciate older women because they really are beacons of grace, just grace and fortitude and generosity. And I just appreciate women so much.
I think that's a fabulous place to leave it. Lisa Mosconi, the book is The Menopause Brain. Thank you so much. I think that you've made a lot of people feel better with this conversation, certainly me.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And please do come over for a brain scan if anyone is interested. We have clinical trials, we have research programs, we have an Alzheimer's prevention clinic. We are here to help.
Good to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.